This is seminar number 6. I'm sort of speechless about this one. I was thinking last night of how to introduce Lisa, and I came up with about a dozen different ways to introduce her. If you happen to have your program booklet, page 27 is a bio. The more Chris and I get to know Lisa, the more we realize that we have Las Vegas history at a level that's at least as good as anybody else that we know from Las Vegas. Lisa has traveled the world. And of course, you know, the billing of the First Nude Showgirl kind of tells you a little bit about her beginning in Las Vegas. And if you look at the resume, you find that she's been a producer. She's traveled the world. She's been shot by the Russians, and I'm guessing there isn't anybody in the room that could lay claim to that other than Lisa. A what? Oh, Emmy nominated, and 1,000 other things. This little bio in here was actually about 4 pages long. Chris took Lisa's resume and several interviews that we had with Lisa and put it together, and I looked at it and said, there's no way that we have an extra 8 pages in the program booklet to put in everything that Lisa's done. So I took it on the computer and kind of chopped Lisa up a little bit here and there and got it to the point where Todd Barrett, who does this program, was able to put it all on 1 page. Lisa is a gifted speaker. Not at 8:30 in the morning. And so I promised Lisa that I would actually stay up here and sit next to her. And I think that Lisa would like to just tell you a little bit about herself and what she's done and where she's been, and then have questions from the audience. And as opposed to the other times where I've said all of you to just be quiet and wait till the speaker's finished, Lisa likes to be interrupted because her train of thought is a little bit different than ours, and it'll probably go a little bit back and forth anyhow. Chris and I have gotten to know Lisa over several times that we've gotten together for breakfast, and she is, as men in the room would absolutely agree with me, one hell of a woman. And the women in the room that were here last year when Lisa spoke for a few minutes were jumping up and down with the idea of having Lisa come back and do her own program. So without further ado, Lisa Medford.
Good morning, if anybody's any more awake than I am. I know there's going to be some questions, but I have a few that I know I'll answer some things that I know you're not going to ask me, because most people won't ask. But I am 71 years old, and I have not had my face lifted. I've came to Las Vegas in 1957. It was by mistake, because a lot of people ask, how did you get to be the first nude showgirl? Well, I went to Catholic school my whole life. I went to a convent. And that was about not a career choice, believe me. I had a choice to be a nun, a school teacher, a secretary, or a housewife. I guess that was career week. It was really exciting. I couldn't be a policeman because women didn't carry guns, the police officers. Those days I couldn't be a fireman, things I wanted to really do. So I got married right out of high school, because my parents they're all from Lebanon, and they're very old country, and you didn't get to leave the house until you were married. So I thought, well, what the hell, I'll get married. So this nice little Italian guy showed up, and I go, okay, this is a good idea. So I got married, and I started modeling for kind of like pinup magazines. And I don't know how I got into that either, but who knows. So one day the man that ran the agency had a heart attack, and he said, you know, he said, you're the smartest one I have. He said, you're going to have to run this agency until I feel better. So about 3 weeks into the agency, 2 men came into the office. They were producers for the Riviera Hotel. And they said, we have to find nude showgirls, because they're going to change the law in Las Vegas, and we have to be the test dummy. So I'm like, the one in the car, but without clothes on. So I thought, okay, I guess I'm not going to be the test dummy. So I got all these girls. I brought pictures and interviews, and I brought these men in. So for about 2 weeks, they looked at pictures. One was too tall, one was too short. This one didn't, nothing. So I guess it was 3 nights before the show opened here with Harry Belafonte. And that's when he was at his peak. Well, I had been to Vegas as a young child. My parents would bring me here all the time. We'd get in the car and go, oh, are we there yet? Are we there yet? You know, we loved it. And my dad had played poker several times with Bugsy Siegel, but this was after he was killed. No, he played poker before he was killed. I got here after he was killed. And I kind of remember him vaguely because he braided my hair one night, and he made one braid really little and one braid really big, and I told him he ruined my life. But I didn't get shot or anything. So this was about 3 days before the show was to open. And we're sitting there, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, these two guys, Danny Dare, and I can't remember the other guy's name right now, they were smoking these big cigars. It was a little tiny office, and it's like, I'm so tired. And they're looking, we got stacks of pictures. Women would apply that were like 70 years old, and 300-pounders, and anorexic. And finally, they said, we have a problem. This show has to go on. We got about 72 hours or so, and this show has to go. So he's looking at me, he goes, he had a cigar, he goes, hey kid, he said, you got any tits? I go, what? He said, do you have any tits? I go, well, yeah. You know, vanity. He said, let me see. So I opened my old shirt and I closed my old shirt, and he goes, okay, you're gonna leave tomorrow morning, leave in the morning, go home and get some sleep, and you're gonna be in the show. I don't know what happened. I told my husband, he thought I was crazy, and he wouldn't go with me. So I got in my car and I took my parakeet on the front seat, and I came to Vegas. And the costume was not acceptable. What little costume it wasn't really like nude, okay? It was, they brought me these little pasties, and in the 50s, the girls wore them with sequins, and they were all pointy. And I thought that was vulgar. So I said, well, I can't wear those. Those are really vulgar. He goes, you're naked. What the hell's vulgar? I go, no, there's a difference. I'm not going to put this on. So he said, well, okay. He said, what do you suggest? So I saw in the costume, they had a shelf of all kinds of stuff, and I saw some silver sparkle. So I put eyelash glue, and I dipped my boob into the cup. And I got sparkle, and it was really cute. So I thought, well, this will do. And then he gave me these little French kind of underpants to wear. Except I have fish hips. I don't have wide hips. So they didn't have the great spandex, you know. So these little things were all mushy on my hips. They kind of like puckered. And I said, I can't wear that. That's disgusting. He said, well, what do you want to do? So I took a scissors and I cut the sides off. And it had a little patch in front of nude fabric with rhinestones, and the rest was just mesh. So I cut the little square, and he goes, well, how are you going to keep it on? Because this is long before we have the G-strings and all the neat stuff they have. So we got two-way toupee tape, and I glued it on. I pulled it up the back and stuck a Band-Aid across the back to hold it on, because I didn't have to move. I just stood under this waterfall like a potted plant, and that was it. And then it was a love affair. I mean, when I was a little girl, I was in love with Las Vegas. And I remember once when my dad and mom brought me, we sat in the front row at a show. I don't remember where it was. It could have been the Sands. And I saw the girls. We sat right in the front, and I looked up and I saw all these feathers and rhinestones and music, and oh, it was wonderful. And my cousin one night, I'm jumping around because my mind is like, I'm getting old and I just remember things. So my cousin, we're laying in bed, and she goes, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be a showgirl. And she said, I said, what do you want to be? She said, I want to get married and have 4 children. And we both got our wish. She had 4 children, and I became a showgirl. But believe me, it really wasn't a real career choice. But you didn't need any credits. You didn't need any brains. And Vegas was so fun. I cannot tell you. People think they have fun now. They don't even know what fun was. It was so safe because of the mob being here. They were gentlemen. They were great. It was always just like a small family. We'd all go, and every performer would give a show one time while they were here, after their regular 2 shows for all the other performers. Now, nobody here ever gets a free ticket to go see Bette Midler or to go see Celine or to go see Elton John. A couple of shows do, like Phantom or something, but it's not the same. And now it's, they want your dollar. They don't care. They don't put the drinks in your room. They don't, I don't know, it's just different. Even the outsides look weird. But in those days when the mob was here, they remembered everybody. You could come in and they would ask you, how's your mother? How was her hip surgery? And you go, my God, I only lost $100 here. My room was $12 a night. How does this guy remember? But that was the gift that the mob had, that this group, the hotel now is bean counters, so they don't really care. You slide your little card and that's all they know who you are. But I bought a house in 1967, and where the MGM Hotel is now used to be called the Tropicana Golf Course and Country Club. And I bought this little house second from the end. Wasn't quite little, but it was a nice house. And Betty Grable lived next door with her mother. She had already divorced Harry James. And I kind of liked the house, but all of a sudden, after 9 months, I'm kind of going through a divorce. And I never did stay in Las Vegas for more than a year and a half, or I'd stay 6 months, because I would get jaded, you know, and you'd be walking by the store with your husband and you go, oh, look at that mink coat, and he didn't buy it for me. And I thought, you cheeso. So I realized that I was spoiled, you know. And she lived next door, and one day this really nice, good-looking man knocked on my door. And he wanted to know if the house was for sale, and I said no, and he asked if he could look at it, and I brought him in. In those days, you didn't expect the Boston Strangler or someone to come in your house. And this nice-looking man came in, and young guy, and he went through the house, and I walked him out the door, and he said, are you sure it's not for sale? I said no. So he walked a little ways away, and he turned around, and he came back. He said, can I ask you what you paid for this house? And I said, I paid $60,000. He said, well, he said, I'll give you 160 if you'll carry my second for a year. We made a deal, and that was Steve Wynn. I wish I had not cashed those checks right now. But then I left Las Vegas, and I did not come back until the late 70s. I came back for a year and built a bar and ran it and sold it. And I did not come back again until I retired. I worked for Sony Pictures for 15 years, and then I came back here. And I love it. I mean, I love living here, and it's wonderful, and I've made some good friends. And I was so surprised how many really old showgirls live here and dancers. It's amazing that they're still here, or they've gone away back to New York and they've come back. But it's been a trip. I just am kind of sorry the mob's not here. I guess they would be kind of surprised if they could look down or up and see how it's all gone. But the only one I truly hated was Spilatro. He was a terrible little guy. And I'm trying to think, what else is exciting? Oh, the talent. We had this great, massive talent. I remember one night, Johnny Carson came on stage, and he was carrying a diving board under his arm. He had this big diving board, and he said, I want everyone to know this is all that is left after my 4th divorce. I got the diving board. But we used to have, you know, Don Rickles and Shecky Green and Rowan and Martin. One time, when Dick Martin and Dan Rowan were appearing here at the Riviera, I thought, oh, you know, I got nothing to do. I'll just go up to Dick's room and see there's always a party. Something's going on. So I walked in, and I knocked on the door. I thought maybe he'll be here, because he wasn't really a big gambler and a big drinker. But he was a womanizer. So I knocked on the door, and just a minute, here comes Dick Martin. He had on a top silk hat, a trumpet in his hand, and he was bare-ass naked with a Woody. That's how he opened the door. But that was what Vegas used to be like. And we'd all meet at this place called the Copa Lounge. And it was true. It was hysterical. He was really, when he died the other day, I felt really bad. It's, yeah, you know, you keep losing people. But I just remember the Woody. But he was great. And there was just entertainment all over. And now it's like they have someone here and they beat you over the head for 5 years. You know, maybe there's not enough talent to go around, but in those days you had Maury Amsterdam would come in, and Shecky Green and Don Rickles, and you couldn't see everybody fast enough. They were here for 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and the Rat Pack was here. That was always fun. Sammy Davis gave great parties. He would invite everybody in every show. And it was just different, you know. I mean, things were bad. It was, of course, segregated, the town. You couldn't live on this side of town if you were Oriental, black, or Mexican. It's the same as it was in Miami. You couldn't check into a Arthur Godfrey hotel if you had an Italian name. So, yes?
Where did Sammy Davis have those parties?
You know, he had the best one. He had one where he took everybody to North Las Vegas, which then was Blacktown. And he served all the, I don't even remember where it was, but it was just past the Moulin Rouge. And he served everyone a Southern food. We had collard greens, and I choked on one of those little fried porky things. But it was, he must have had 300 people. And then he had another party at the Sands one night. He had the big room, one of the big rooms at the Sands. And then when the show closed, the night everybody left, they would make the showroom a party. And they were fun. They were great. Is there any more questions? Yes.
Careful, Ralph.
Come on, Ralph, get up here close to me.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I understand that during your era of showgirls, that the showgirls and the topless, they were expected to mingle with the high rollers after the show each night.
Yeah, we mingled.
Can you share anything with us
Yes,
on that?
we will mingle. Okay. The dancers had to leave. The dancers were not the same as showgirls. They worked hard, way harder than we did. They made way less money than we did, and we got all the goodies. You had to stay until 2 o'clock in the morning. There were hotel hookers that worked in the shows. There were about 4 per show. The Tropicana had 4, Dunes had 4 or 5. And they would strictly turn tricks after the show or go with the high rollers. Sometimes they didn't even show up for the show. They'd put a swing girl in. They wouldn't show up for 2 or 3 days. And but you weren't forced to do anything you didn't want to do. But I think a few of you people asked why I was speaking at the chip show. Well, let me tell you something. I have stolen more chips shoved down my bustier than you guys could collect in your lifetime. I could palm a chip, and guys would give you money. They'd say, "Oh, here's $500." The only one I have right now is the one from the Riviera with my picture on it. You know what? I used to have all my silver dollars, but we used to go to the market. We could go to Smith's, and we'd pay with the chips. You'd buy gas, and you'd pay with the chips. Anything, you'd buy a dress, a pair of shoes, and you'd give chips. And everyone took it as legal tender. It was money. And now, of course, they stopped that. First they stopped when they made those little stupid coins, the dollar coins. That nobody would take. Even people didn't want them for a tip at the parking. The valet doesn't even want them. But they would take them reluctantly if you want to hand them 4 or 5 silver coins. But we used to pass out silver dollars. Who knew what they'd be worth? You just don't think about it. What if I had kept my toys when I was 6 years old and the dinosaurs were still out there in Red Rock? But it was, you don't think about it. Why would you ever think about a chip in the 50s of being worth anything except the face value of the chip? Little did I know I could probably have retired if I had saved a chip from. But we did. We would cram chips, and sometimes we'd stay till 4 if we had a big gambler. One night I was at the Tropicana, and one of the bosses, Sid Wyman, came to me and he said, "Lisa," he said, "would you and pick another showgirl?" He said, "We have Miguel Alemán, the president of Mexico. He'd like to have dinner with you. And he has his attorney general with him. Could you get another girl?" So I found a girl that spoke Spanish. So we went between shows, we went to dinner. And we had this wonderful dinner, and we're sitting in the very fancy room with the $600 Lafitte Chateau or whatever the drink was. And I am being so elegant. I mean, I'm with the president of Mexico, and I am the hottest showgirl. I am so cool. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, he looks at the other guy, and they're smiling at each other. And I go, "Oh, I am really cool." They're smiling, and they said something in Spanish very low, and the girl couldn't hear them. And I thought I was just being the cat's tit. And I looked down, and we used to wear 3 pair of eyelashes on top, on each one, and 2 pair on the bottom. And I looked down to my mashed potatoes, and there was my whole top pair of 3 eyelashes. I had one little eye and one big eye, and I'm going, oh, Jesus, what a dog you are. So I took my eyelash, and I brushed off the potatoes, and I walked away, glued it back on, and came back to the table. But then I remember one time, Carl Cohen asked me to hostess a party for the Prince of Saudi Arabia. Now, this is a funny story. I'm an Arab, so well, Lebanese aren't really considered Arabs any more than Palestinians are. People think they're Arabs, but the only real Arabs are Saudis. That's the only real Arab. The rest of us are just like Jack Mormons or Jack Arabs, you know, we just kind of show up. And but now, because of 9/11, everyone thinks the Middle East is all Arabs, but it's not true. So, but I can understand the Arabic that Saudis speak, even though it's a little different dialect. And we're sitting there, and I'm trying to be very proper, and he's sitting there with 2 other his bodyguards, and he said in Arabic, "How much do you think this whore is going to cost me?" Well, I wasn't for sale, obviously, because I was being kept by Carl Cohen, who was the guy that punched Sinatra, and he was the owner of the Sands, so I was not for hire, sale, rent, to be borrowed. I'd sneak off and cheat once in a while, but that was about it. And I looked at him, and I didn't say a word. I just smiled, because I never let him know I was an Arab. And I smiled at him, and I said in perfect English, 3 goats, 2 camels, and every goddamn dime you own. He was not a happy camper. I think he crapped an oil well, because it was kind of fun for me, though, and I got up and I just walked away. You know, if I had known now, I would have lifted up his little robe and made him happy and gotten an oil well, but you know. But the mixing was actually fun, because we would gamble, and I am or was a good gambler. So, but you'd gamble the money, and you'd take the chips and you'd drop them in here, and you'd slide them in there, and you'd tuck them in here, and then you'd cash in a few when they weren't looking, and then you'd stand there, and he'd say, oh, the guys would go, oh, you're out of money. Oh, it's okay. No, here, take 500. Now they'd go losing 10,000, and I'd go home with 4. So I'd go home and I'd take the bustier and I'd shake it out. All the chips would fall, $100 chips all over the bed and the floors. I think one night, the most I ever took, I got 7,000 one night. I won on, I hate roulette, but that Miguel Alamain made me play roulette. And I never did see him again. After the second show, he gave me $1,000 to play roulette. And I wanted to thank him or say goodnight or something, and they said, oh, he flew out 2 hours ago on his plane. So I thought that was really a stroke of luck, because I would have had to do a real soft shoe on that one for $7,000. But that was fun. That's why the mixing was fun. And you sat there with the mob guys, and you went in the coffee shop with them, and you heard conversations that maybe you shouldn't have heard, but you pretended you never heard them. And that's what made it interesting. But the dancers didn't get to mix, so ha-ha. And did someone else had a question back there? Okay, bail me out.
I'm sure she will.
Okay.
Talk about the guy underneath your dress. Remember when you told us about where you were standing on the stage and the guy crawled?
Oh, yeah. One night, the costumes were like unbelievable. The costumes we had, especially the Lido show, you know, I mean, not the Lido, the Casino de Paris at the Dunes was one of the great hotels to ever work for. If you worked for Sid Wyman or George Duckworth, or you worked for Carl Cohen, the Riviera was a great place to work, because that's where Sid started here, he and George Duckworth in the 50s. Then they all moved to the Dunes, and because the Dunes got in big trouble financially, and they sent them over there. And I had these incredible costumes, and some of the big capes, you know, they were steel. All this woven steel, and they were heavy. Some of them were 80 pounds, 75 pounds, and they would take 2 wardrobe ladies to hook. Everything had one hook. Your dress had one hook. You know, you either slithered into it, or you slid it up on you, or it had a hook here, a hook here. So one night I was at the Tropicana, and I had to do a number that I did every night, but I had to stand in a different place because there was a girl that was out. So they made me go stand on this passerella, which is it's a lit up stage kind of that runs around the orchestra pit. And that's when we used to have really orchestras in there. And so I'm out there and I go standing on the edge of the stage. And I'm standing there and my boobies were covered. And I had all these little ostrich feathers in the hat with the little feathers. And the big hoop skirt. And around the hoop skirt was piping. Now I'm sure they would have put it in PVC and it wouldn't have weighed so much, but it was the steel piping, heavy aluminum piping. And I'm standing there, oh, so cute. And all of a sudden I hear the audience coming from just like would be this section. And they're giggling. And I'm going, okay, something's sticking out. Because I can't see behind me, I can't see to my left, you can't turn. So only peripheral vision, and I couldn't see anything. And nobody else was laughing except this little group of people that were right near me. So I kind of tried to look to see if my pasty was sticking out or something. Was nothing. I was fine, and I didn't know what someone was doing behind me. But we're not supposed to make the audience laugh. It's like there's an opera singer going, ah, and it's really a terrible number. But I'm standing there, and all of a sudden, I feel a hand on my thigh. And when you've got a costume on, it looks like we think what we're doing, but we don't. We're thinking about what we're going to shop for tomorrow. And you got your legs like, and you're daydreaming. Your mind is 100 miles away. And this hand grabbed me. And I kicked. Well, it was a drunk, and he had crawled up on the table, which everybody saw but me, and he crawled under my skirt. I hated that damn costume. So I broke his tooth, and he was going to sue the hotel, but it didn't work. Then the same costume, this was about a month later. After the end of the show, you kind of take your little costume, and you go back here, and you stand, and the curtain comes down. Well, the curtain also had a wire. The curtain also had a pipe. And I'm standing there, and we take this big bow, and we stand, and the curtain goes down, and then the curtain goes up, and then the curtain goes down. So I take the bow, and the curtain goes up, and up, and up, and it caught onto the dress. And all of a sudden, I realized it's higher up than the ceiling, and that's where I'm going to end up. And the dress is going up and up and up, and I go, oh my God. So I took the one hook, and I undid the hook. I put my hands up, and the dress went up, and the hat fell over my face. And I had on we used to make our own G-strings, because you didn't used to buy them in those days. And mine was blue with little yellow ducks. And you hold the tights down with a big safety pin like you had for diapers. And there I am with the ducks and the safety pin, and the audience is like oblivious, and my dress is up in the sky, and I just took a big bow, and I just walked off the stage like with this stupid G-string. It was really, there were so many nights like that, where we used to get even with the dancers. So we'd have animal acts like Siegfried and Roy. So in the dark, we'd take a big plastic turd and we'd throw it on the stage. And the dancers would come out and have to dance around the turd because they didn't want to step in it. And we'd laugh. And then, or we'd throw a wad of money. We'd have big bunches of phony money with a rubber band on it. And you'd watch the dancers trying to pick it up while they're dancing because they thought that. It was just a wonderful place to be. It still is a wonderful place to be.
Lisa, how many showgirls were there, and what was your era as a showgirl, first of all? And how many were there like you? I mean, I know that you're one of a kind, but
You
how
mean
many
nude?
Yes.
They came in after, 57. I started in 57, February. Right after, maybe 5 months later, Minsky's opened. But Minsky was kind of burlesque. They had little champagne glasses under their boobs and a little bicycle clip with feathers sticking out. It was kind of cheesy. But it was quite a phenomenon then. But they had about maybe 8 girls. And they just kind of went up and down a runway. They really didn't have a production numbers. And then the Stardust opened, the Trop opened, and those were the big shows. And then I had left after the Belafonte show, and I came back to the Riviera with George Gobel. and worked fully clothed. And then I went into the Trop in 1961. And I stayed there on and off into the Dunes in 64. I was in 66 or 65. I was at the Sands. I was the last Copa girl. The night I started, everybody got 30 days notice. There were no more Copa girls. So I was the first nude, the last Copa girl, and I'm still here, waiting. I have no idea what I'm waiting for. I am waiting for Godot.
You have a group of other showgirl friends, right? You still get together with them?
They're hysterical. I think there's nothing quite like an old showgirl. I met some by mistake the other day. I was at Green Valley Ranch, if any of you have ever been there. I live not far from Green Valley Ranch. And there were 4 or 5 ladies in front of my roommate, who was also one of the lead nude dancers for most of the shows, the El Rancho and everything. Belden Cattleman fired her 3 times. Every time he wanted to sleep with her, he'd fire her because she wouldn't sleep with him, so they'd put her in a different wig and she'd come back the next night, because she was the only lead nude they had. And then maybe a month later, he'd try again, and he'd fire her again. She'd come back in a red wig. I mean, it was just, but what was I talking, where was I? Oh, where the fuck was I? Oh, so my girlfriend and I, my roommate and I, were walking down to the valet parking. There's an escalator that goes down to valet parking. Showgirls always valet park. Never take a showgirl to a parking lot and make her walk. We do valet. So we're going down to the valet, and there's these 4 or 5 girls in front of us. And one of them was like kind of huge, and she had these little phony curls on top, blonde, with big polka dot earrings and a big polka dot top, and she was louder than I am. And they're getting on the escalator, all these old ladies, and they're kind of, you know how you hesitate, you know, to get on the escalator, you kind of think, you make sure you have your step. So out of this booming voice, we're about 10 feet behind her, she goes, "Jesus Christ, I used to go downstairs naked with a feather out of my ass, and I can't even get on the escalator." So we got to the bottom of the escalator. I said, "What show were you in?" She said, "Barry Ashton, 1958. I said, "Thank you." And one girl was one that used to be in the swing. And they were all old showgirls, all damn. But you can always tell, because they're kind of noisy, and they're always mostly bigger one way or the other than others. They're taller or fatter than everybody else.
Lisa, how do the new showgirls, in your estimation, compare to the old showgirls? That's my last question.
They're not really showgirls. They always go, well, this is showgirls at the airport. They hire these girls. They're like extras in movies. The ones on stage, I went to the Folies Bergère one night about 10 years ago, and I noticed the bad boob jobs. They were really cheesy, and they all looked kind of like anorexic. We were a little bigger, and not so much booby bigger, but we were just not as tall. We weren't as tall. They have very tall kids now. You know, my nieces are 5'10" and a half, and everybody's just big. And I was considered still little. I was big for the Riviera, 5'8", but I was still very tiny. I was tiny at the Trop. They were 6-footers, 5'11", 5'10" and a half. And I lost my thought again. What were we talking about? Chris? Oh, they don't. Showgirls have attitude. You know, I can't explain it, but when you walk across the stage, you're kind of like, "Don't you wish you could have me?" Eat your heart out, and then we'd smile. You know, it was a job. It was a life. You took great pride in it, and it was, boy, people would be really happy to get to, when you, after work, the showgirls would be in the casino, and you could talk to us, and we'd have drinks with the customers and sign autographs, sign their programs, and they were wonderful. They were amazing. Now it's like they don't care about anything. I mean, they just stand there and they're marking time, and there's no attitude, there's no facial expression. I just think it's kind of sad. But the showgirls are gone, like the dinosaur.
Eat your heart out, guys. You know the Carl Cohen story you told me about? You never tried out for a show, and the only show you tried out, you didn't get in?
Yeah.
In the Riviera poker room that was up near the front where you used to sneak in and watch the mob guys?
Oh, yeah. That was the Riviera. When the mob ran Vegas, there was, well, speaking of the mob ran Vegas, I want to say special thanks to Steve Fisher, who wrote that book, who kind of brought me back to life, because I guess I forgot who I was and what I did. He's doing great. I wish he'd finished the second book, because it's going to be super. And now he has an audio tape out. He's an incredible man. I can listen to him forever. I mean, we get each other going with stories, and it just doesn't stop because they overlapped, you know. Steve's a bit younger than I am, but he just was, he had good memory when he was even 12 years old. I was probably the only showgirl and one of the few people allowed in the counting room at the Sands. I was back there. This is before they were all caught skimming and stuff. And that was something to see. It was amazing to watch that much money. It was like being in Fort Knox. I worked for a bank. I was a loan officer at one time, and I could go into the vault, and that wasn't even impressive. This was amazing. And then at the Riviera here, when you used to drive into the Riviera, it was magnificent until Rickless had a bad crack night and designed the front of this place. But it was, you drove in and it was this beautiful, huge driveway with a portico over the top. And you walked in and it was like this stretch of carpeting and 2 stairs into the casino. And over to the left was cigarette stand and jewelry. Over here. But right around the edge was a door, a little door. And that little door was no stakes poker for the mob. And one night, Carl Cohen invited me in there. That was something else. To watch them bet $1 million a hand, $500,000, $50,000 ante. It was fun. I mean, those days, I was really fortunate. I was fortunate in the fact that my cousins had something to do with the building of this hotel, Frank and Elias Atoll. So when I first came here, of course, I couldn't tell anybody who I was because of my family. Arabs are big gamblers, and a lot of them were up here all the time, and I kind of would like hide out because I didn't want my parents to ever find out what I did that first show. And so I was pretty careful, you know, but I got to meet them all, and because they knew who I was in a way, I was allowed to see things and hear things and go places that most people wouldn't go. But it all kind of came to the end with, you know, I think it was Karl Marx or someone said that greed is the downfall of capitalism. And I think they got greedy, and that was the downfall of the mob. It was Spilatro. I think Spilatro was the downfall. They let him run ragged. And until that time, nobody got murdered in Las Vegas. They would take you out to Primm. They'd take you out. Nobody got, even with the hit put on them, like Gus Greenbaum and his wife. I was sorry that they killed her too, but Gus was a heroin addict, and he was also a thief. And he was a nasty man. And he was just not nice. Not nice to girls, not nice to anybody. And I was not sad to see his throat cut particularly. I guess if they had paid me, I would have done it. But but they waited till he went back to Arizona. They did not hit, the hit was put here. And back in St. Louis, the hit was put, you know, the men back east, St. Louis and Chicago, not so much Chicago. All the mob that I knew here a lot of them were Cleveland, St. Louis. There wasn't that much real, even though it was Chicago, you know, Meyer Lansky and everything. The main guys that ran the casinos were all the Cleveland and Cincinnati and St. Louis mobs. And, but he was not killed here. He was not, the minute he left to go home, that was when they got him. This town was absolutely safe. Nobody stole. If a dealer stole, they'd break his fingers. That was always it. So people just didn't do it. You just didn't screw with the mob. Unfortunately, when you see all the nasty people on the Strip and the gangs, you just go, oh, where's the mob? This would not happen. This was so tightly controlled, you know. And I don't know, any other questions or?
Lisa,
Yes.
what can you tell us about the Tower of Pisa and Foxy's?
And Foxy's?
Yes.
Delicatessen? Oh my God. God bless Foxy's. Foxy's Delicatessen was kind of across from the Stratosphere. If you just kept going north on Las Vegas Boulevard, you'd see Foxy's. It's kind of that black building that Ivana Trump tried to make something out of with the awnings. That's just about where Foxy's was. And they had a little thing in the back where you'd get fried wontons with Chinese mustard after the show. And they had the biggest, bestest chocolate eclairs ever in the world. They had an eclair that must have weighed 1.5 pounds. And I would go after the show. Now, don't forget, we would lose 5 pounds a night dancing, up and down stairs. And I counted one night at the Dunes, I went up and down 1,800 stairs a night. So that was a lot of work. And the lights were hot, and you're rushing, and 10 costume changes. I mean, your skin wears out just putting clothes on. So I would go about once every 2 weeks. I would amble over about 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock. I always get home before your makeup turns orange. You know, your eyelashes start lifting and then you get little orange streaks coming down. So you look really good in the dark, but daylight, nobody looks good. So before I turned orange, I'd go to Foxy's. And I would get 4 chocolate eclairs. They were $1.25 or something a piece. The custard was so yellow and so real custard, and the chocolate was this milk chocolate thick, and the thing was just heavy. It was almost pornographic, this great eclair. And I would stand in Foxy's and I would eat the eclair. Then I would go to my car and I would eat the other eclair. Then I got home and I took a shower and I got in bed and I would eat the third eclair. And then about 8 o'clock in the morning, I'd open my eyes for a minute and I'd wolf down the 4th eclair, and then I'd go back to sleep till noon. And of course, I weighed 104 pounds and I was 5'8". But we ate like linebackers. We'd eat steaks and potatoes and we drank everything and we ate everything. But you know, you worked it off. Now, I'd have a tuna sandwich, my stomach sticks out for 3 days, and I hate myself, you know. So it's your metabolism and your habits change. But Foxy's was the best ever. There's still nowhere like it. I still get an eclair and I look at it and go, oh, it's not Foxy's. And that was a big hangout for the show people. Everyone loved Foxy's and the Copa Lounge. The Copa Lounge on Riviera, right next door to the Riviera here. God knows what they put there, Ross for less or some terrible thing. But there was a place called the Copa Lounge, and it had a flagstone front. And that's where we would all go after the show, Sinatra and Dean Martin, everybody. So one night, it was Jack Carter and all of us, we did a trick. Spilatro's nephew or cousin or brother opened up a place called the Tower of Pizza down the Strip. Now, you know, further out. So we went into the Copa and we ordered salad, and we ordered our wine, and we ordered the pizza from Tower Pizza. And he delivers 20 pizzas. And we were barred, Sinatra, all of us. We could not go back for 30 days. Copa threw us out physically. We were thrown out of the Copa Lounge and not allowed back for 30 days. He didn't think that was funny. And Carl Cohen was the greatest man. If he wasn't married, I would have married him. This was a man that weighed 400 pounds, had big blue eyes, always smiled and controlled everything, but always with a smile, always soft-spoken. And he also punched Sinatra in the mouth, which gave me extreme pleasure. He knocked his bridge out. Frank drove through the casino, the Sands Coffee Shop, which is the greatest place that ever lived too. And he drove through it. He was mad his credit had been cut off because he and Howard Hughes were both porking Ava Gardner, I guess. And so Howard Hughes got mad when she married Sinatra. So he cut off all his credit. And Sinatra, of course, thought it was Carl Cohen. So he went after the wrong guy.
Lisa, how are we going to preserve all these great stories and all this great history?
You know, there's some really good books out now, Steve's being one of them. I did not even know that Billy Dickerson really started the flamingo. I always thought it was Bugsy Siegel, but it was Billy Dickerson, and there's a wonderful book out by his son about how he got to start the flamingo, but he was such a degenerate gambler, he'd go down to Binion's with $1 million in a suitcase and it'd be gone in 3 hours. And he got into trouble, and that's when he asked the mob for money, asked Meyer Lansky for money, and then they brought in Bugsy Siegel, who didn't know poop about construction. And Del Webb got his start there. You know, I guess they were hijacking stuff. I don't know what they were doing. But they got the flamingo belt. But there's some really wonderful books. And there's few of us left, I guess. I run into some people now and then that are really fun, that go back, you know, guys I just run into, and then I go. You can tell if they got white hair, they generally have some stories to tell.
You want to stop at a certain point, or?
Yeah.
Tell them about the times that you've never had to try out for a show. Carol would always call you.
Yeah.
Then make that the last one.
Okay. One more quick story. Showgirls, they always have rehearsal. I mean, the tryouts. You have auditions to be a showgirl. And they will call in, maybe 200 girls will show up. 9 o'clock in the morning, you sit, and you go in the showroom, and you go in there, and they're all wearing their tights and their, you know, high heels, and they all want to look real, their makeup's on, and they're all auditioning for a show. Well, I never auditioned for a show. I would come to Vegas, and Sid Wyman would say, "Oh, do you want to work?" And I'd go, "Yeah." They'd fire a girl, and I'd get the job. Carl Cohen, "Why don't you go see the show tonight over there? Go see the show, and if you like it, start in 3 days." Okay. So you learn 10 numbers in 3 days. So I never auditioned for a show. So now they have a show called Ziegfeld Follies. They're putting in this, redoing Ziegfeld Follies. And I thought, okay, this is really cool. I'm going to go on the Ziegfeld Follies. And I didn't get the job. He said I didn't look like a showgirl. So, and also I lost a movie that way. It was called The Oscars, and in the Oscars, the movie called The Oscars, they hired showgirls, and they told me I did not look like a showgirl, which I had been for how many years. And there was another movie, I think it was like The Egyptian or one of those 10 Commandment movies, and they said I didn't look Middle Eastern. So they hired Deborah Paget and gave, with her blue eyes, and put a black wig on her. And that's it. And thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you, Sheldon and Chris, and all of you for coming.
Can we ask one more question?
Pardon?
I said, can we ask one more question?
You can ask all you want. Okay.
If you can you tell us how you were shot by the Russians?
Dumb. No, I was.
Thank you.
I left here in '68 and went to Czechoslovakia. I became a photojournalist, and I was writing a lot of music articles. And then I found out they didn't know who Dean Martin was. They didn't know Frank Sinatra, but they knew Morgana King and Duke Ellington. It was very peculiar. So I'm getting ready to leave for the Poland Film Festival. And the day we had been out shooting, there was a movie being shot, Bridget Remagen. So I had some friends that were doing stunts and everything. So I went out to the movie set, and I was looking at the tanks and everything. And it was about a week later, and I'm leaving for Poland that afternoon, and I'm all dressed in this little suit, and we used to travel, you know, nice. And I had on my little high heels, and I'm all cute, and my bags are packed. And I had noticed an airplane going over the city all day. And what was weird is that it wasn't, I learned to look at airplanes in the Second World War when I was a kid, and I knew the outlines of, you know, P-52s and you know, all these little different airplanes. And I see this airplane, and it's odd looking because it's a Russian airplane. And they don't look like our airplanes. The silhouette's different. And the guy closed the curtains. He said, "Don't look at that." I said, "Why is that airplane flying over the city all day long?" He kept circling and circling all day. He said, "Just don't look at it." So a few hours later, I hear, like an earthquake, the ground's moving, and I think it's an earthquake, but I didn't think Prague has earthquakes. So I ran and I looked out the window, and I see tanks coming up the street, and I go, "Oh, they're shooting the movie here in town." And I looked at the tank, and I'm going, something's wrong with that tank. That's not a German tank, and it's not an American tank, and there were no Russian tanks at Remagen. And just then, part of a building blew up. It was pretty bad. It was bad day. And so I ran out to get pictures. I had 2 Nikon cameras, and I'm running out the door in my little high heels like a Miss Doopy. And I get out there, and I'm taking pictures, and I decided that I should maybe get up closer to the tank. So I got as close as I could, and I started to, I was going to climb the tank. And the 2 Russians came after me, and I didn't realize I was shot, because you don't feel it, you know. And they got me into a dead-end street, and they had their guns up, and I thought, oh my God, my father paid $600 for this nose. And so I put my hands over my face, and I kept screaming, fuck you, I'm an American. I knew they'd understand one or the other. And all of a sudden, there was blood all over me, and I realized then that I'd been shot, and I guess they realized it, and the fuck you, I'm an American made them scared, so they ran away, and that was it. I got on an airplane. I never did see a doctor. But I will show you my scar. It's my little scar. Yeah, on right across my arm. I would have lost the use of that arm if it had gone a 1/16 of an inch more. But anyway, the gods were smiling on me. Thank you all again so much for listening to this old lady. Okay.
Thank you very much for coming. That's seminar number 6, and that's the last one for this convention. Thank you.